Okay, hello, everybody. Welcome to another Monday night webinar. My name is Ben Jackson. I am the co-founder and the chief operating officer of a nonprofit called Upsolve. We help people break free from debt and get back on their feet financially. This is work that I absolutely love because bankruptcy genuinely saved my life. About 9 years ago, I had $60,000 in debt, and I had an income that really wasn't even close to covering that. I was making about 20 grand driving for Uber and Lyft, trying to dig myself out, and it was not working at all. And it wasn't until I found bankruptcy that I really had any hope at all. And that allowed me to essentially just reset my life, get back on my feet, and put me in a position where I said, wow, that was amazing. I want to help other people get that same freedom and opportunity. So I went to law school, got a degree, and decided to dedicate myself and my career to helping people break free from debt and working alongside other people like tonight's guest, Yale Levy from Solo, who do the same. So we're going to dive into some questions that you all have tonight about how to break free from debt, how bankruptcy works, how you should handle debt lawsuits, what debt settlement works like, things like that. But if you watched our last webinar with Yale, which you should definitely check out if you haven't, we got a lot of answers to those questions already. So we're going to kind of do things a little differently tonight. We're going to try to get a sense of who Yale is as a person. So you can get a sense of like who these people are, who were debt collectors in the past, are now sort of debt fighters, which is part of Yale's story. And just learn that there are people and humans behind this whole debt process. So Yale, welcome back to the webinar. Good to have you again.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. Excited to be here.
Really, really glad to have you. I love having people like you on this call because, as somebody who's seen both sides, you can kind of give clear insight into what happens in the background with debt. So Yale, I just got to know before we get started, we're talking about debt collection. What is something crazy other than debt in your life that you've collected?
That I collected on?
Yeah, maybe as a kid.
As a kid. Oh,
yeah.
My goodness gracious. I was a pretty common kid. My parents got me into stamp collecting, so I did some stamp collecting from time to time. Some coins. My brother was big into baseball cards and pro wrestling. It was pretty fun.
Pro wrestling, nice.
It used to be the WWF. Now it's a little bit different, but Andre the Giant and
oh my gosh,
yeah.
The Princess Bride is one of my all-time favorite movies, so I love Andre the Giant.
Oh my God, what a gentle beast he was!
Yeah, an amazing guy. Well, that's really exciting. So, what did your path from a kid collecting, cards, being really interested in professional wrestling, to where you are now at Solo look like?
Well, like every young person, if I can remember it back that far, back in 1988 when I graduated high school, which Ben, you probably weren't even born yet. So
no comment.
I get it. I went to IU for an undergrad, and I went to the business school because I had a good business school in Indiana, and I had a degree in accounting. I had no idea what I wanted to do. All my friends were applying to law school and taking the LSAT and taking Kaplan to the review course for that LSAT. So I said, what the hell, I'm going to take it too. I got into Ohio State University and law school, and I took 3 years there to get a law degree. And a friend of mine in law school, his name was Greg Pope at the time, said, boy, we don't want to work for somebody else. Both his dad and my dad were accountants. So we started a law firm in the back of his accounting practice. And one day we sent out announcements about opening of our law practice to all of his dad's clients in Columbus, Ohio, where I live now. And some lady called who was a client of his dad's and said, hey, are you bonded? We are a collection agency, and we use the legal process when we can't collect voluntarily to sue people to get them to pay their medical bills. So again, this was 1995 when I graduated from law school. I was a young kid. I had no idea what she was talking about, being bonded. But of course, we had nothing else to do, so we said yes.
Yeah.
And before I knew it, I slowly, jumped down the rabbit hole and was collecting debts for a living.
Sure.
I knew nobody in the industry. I had no software. I had no idea what was going on. We just I did it all. I posted payments, I forwarded demand letters, I
So
prepared
you were deep in
complaints.
the industry.
Oh yeah, so I was as green could be, but we did it. We got a start, and from 1995 to 2004, we had one or two clients. It was a pretty small operation,
Mm.
just kind of supplemented our income from the regular civil practice that we had. And then I went to a conference of debt collection attorneys called NARCA at the time, National Association of Retail Collection Attorneys. I met some people back then, in 2004. You sit down next to somebody, and before you know it, you got a client. It's not like that anymore, but that's the way it was. And we were off to the races. And from 2004 to 2024, which is 20 years, I dedicated my life to collecting debts against consumers, mostly credit card debts, some auto loans, some medical bills. We slowly cycled out of medical, since medical was kind of a difficult game to play, and that's really when people are at the lowest. But credit cards is a voluntary expense, unlike a medical bill, which is sometimes a necessity.
Yeah.
So people need to know they got to pay their bills back. So we use that legal process. We started in Ohio. I broke up with my partner, Greg Pope. We were called Pope and Levy at the time. We became Levy and Associates. Started off with like 6 people, grew to about 110 people by the time I was done. We were practicing in 5 states: Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky, Maryland, and Virginia. It was a great time. I've really found memories of those years. My kids grew up during that time.
Yeah.
I have 3 boys. They're 24, 22, and 19 now. So they saw me working day and night and weekends all the time. It was really hard. Even when I went to my in-laws to work, I would bring boxes of complaints with me. I would sign them at night and then FedEx them back to my office to have them copy and mail and write checks for and send them out. So
I love hearing these stories, because I think when we think about, like, as people who have struggled with debt, like I have, and I know a lot of people in the audience have, when we think about people who are collecting debt, they tend to just seem like villains, right? Like they seem like these just horrible people on the other end of the phone that are trying to kill us or crush us or whatever the case is. The reality is it's just people. It's people like you. It's people who are taking care of their families, trying to uphold the law, trying to figure out the best way forward. And I think it's really helpful for people to hear that from you, because you're a great guy. Like, I can vouch for you as a kind and caring person. And I think hearing that transition and that journey in your life, I think, is really valuable for people. So I'm curious to, not to short circuit your story, but just to kind of give people a sense of where you went from, which is what you just talked about, to what you do now. What do you do at Solo? Like what's your role
what
there?
happened was, in end of 2023, I retired from my practice. I sold it to somebody else. I had 9 months where I retired and did nothing, walked the dog, exercised a lot.
Yeah,
and
you needed a break.
This guy named George Simons calls me. He had a tech startup called Solo. Many of you might have heard of that. He started in 2019 as Solo Suit, which provides do-it-yourself answers for consumers that are being sued. 70% of civil lawsuits in the lower courts are basically debt collection cases.
Wow,
and 90% of people that are sued end up with a default judgment because they don't know what to do.
It's
amazing. I mean, once you get a judgment against you, guess what? All bets are off. There's really not much you can do anymore, except you find somebody that's, caring enough to help you. But he said, I need to create a product, a do-it-yourself answer solution that allows consumers to avoid getting a default judgment.
Yep.
So that's not the end-all solution.
Sure.
At least it slows down the process. So they have counted it up. They say they have helped 300,000. We have helped 300,000 people avoid default judgment by helping people create answers on our website and then help them file those answers with the courts. But doing this process of doing 300,000 do-it-yourself answers, they realized, or George realized as he interviewed consumers on the platform, that most people said, boy, doing an answer is great, but I really want to settle my debt.
Yeah.
And then he talked to collectors, and collectors say, boy, suing people is great, but we just want to settle the debt.
Yeah. And for those who don't know, can you explain what it means to settle it in a lawsuit?
Settle your debt means that you come to an agreement, usually between 70 to 90% of the debt, and you make payments over time.
Okay.
So both parties have some skin in the game. Both parties get something and give something. Most people, as you know, Ben, do owe the money. They just can't afford to pay it back.
Sure.
So by giving people time and some ability to repay their bills puts them in a better financial situation in the long run. So George had this great idea. Let's create Solo Settle, because everybody in the debt collection ecosystem wants the same thing: a settlement of a debt as quick as possible. Lawyers don't want to do discovery. Lawyers don't want to go to court and do motion default judgments. Sure. Lawyers don't want to do summary judgment motions. They don't want to do garnishments. If somebody would voluntarily pay, most of the time, the lawyer would take a little bit less if the consumer is willing to voluntarily pay. So what we created was something called Solo Settle, which is a digital settlement platform where consumers, like the people on your calls and me and you, are able to offer a collector money voluntarily over time to settle the debt. And we have people every single day, and we have helped thousands and thousands of people settle their debts. The settlement rate's pretty high, like 82% right now. But again, everybody gets what they want. A consumer gets a controlled amount every month to pay, and without the fear of garnishment or bank attachments. Sure. And the collector could do less work because they don't have to go to court.
Yeah, so everybody
find out where the consumer works at, and it really helps a lot. So it's a win-win. Settlement is the solution. Settlement is how you beat the lawyers, because the consumer gains control. The unknown is scary. Having a wage garnishment or bank attachment filed against you at the worst possible moment in your life is terrifying and really difficult to deal with. Yeah. So having control, there's a lot of value to have control about when you pay your bills.
So Solo helps you with this. So there's sort of two things, just to make sure everybody caught that. You have to answer the lawsuit if you get sued, because if you don't answer the lawsuit, you could get a default judgment, and then the collector just wins whether or not they had a good case against you. And once you answer that, you still got to deal with, what is this debt in some way. And one of the ways you can do that is by negotiating a settlement to pay less than what you owe to the debt collector through a tool like Solo Settle, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And I can tell you, I did this for 20 years. And 99 or 98% of the people I dealt with or sued legitimately owed the money, but just couldn't afford to pay it. And that's why settlement is ideal, because it allows you to stretch out those payments and pay over 24, 36, 48 months and get a resolution of that debt.
Which is a great option. If you can afford to do something like that, settling it can be a great option to move forward, because then you don't have these collectors calling you. You're not worrying about wage garnishment, things like that, and those things can be scary. So we got a couple questions here from the audience. Let me just filter back up to this one. So this one is coming from Karen Simpson. She's saying, if you know you're going to file Chapter 7, should you stop paying the bills that you expect to be discharged? My house of cards is ready to collapse. Oh, man, that metaphor, Karen, I really feel that. I remember being in that position. So, Yale, question for you. Karen's saying she knows that she's going to file Chapter 7 bankruptcy. How does somebody usually reach that point when they're thinking about their debt, when they're thinking about, maybe I'm being sued, maybe I'm struggling here? How does somebody know that Chapter 7 is the best path forward versus maybe working with something like Solo to settle the debt?
Right. Again, as you know, Ben, that the soft underbelly of the bankruptcy issue is how do you come up with the money to pay the bankruptcy attorney?
Yeah, if you're
who
working.
didn't advise you about filing bankruptcy.
Yep.
So are you throwing good money after bad?
Sure.
Yes.
Because it's going to cost you, if you work with a lawyer, $1,500, $2,000 to file a bankruptcy case.
I mean, that's what's so great about Upsolve is that you have a free service that really helps people, kind of coaches them through the bankruptcy process. It is not easy and is not for the faint of heart. And it does take a lot of sweat and tears to get through it, but it can be done, Ben, right?
And to Yale's points, if you are considering bankruptcy, you can go to upsolve.org. This free tool walks you through the whole process if it's a fit for you. But if you're in that decision point and you're saying, okay, I'm deciding between trying to settle this debt maybe versus use a free tool like Upsolve, how do you usually make a decision like that?
Right. I mean, sometimes you just go with your gut. It's not an easy decision. It really is going to depend on how many assets you have, what your income is, how much debt you have, and what expenses can you cut to give you some excess income to be able to pay your creditors little by little. And if they haven't sued you, that's a great benefit. Because once those lawsuits start coming in, the compounding effect of garnishments and settlements is going to be very difficult to overcome. But if you could start with maybe the smallest debt and try to knock those out, smallest to largest. Some people recommend starting with the largest and going from largest to smallest. It's really tough. You got to really figure out, and I'm sure there's lots of sites out there that tells you what creditors do sue and what creditors don't.
Yeah.
What I would recommend if it was me, and again, I'm not giving you legal advice, even though I am an attorney, I cannot provide legal advice over the internet. But if it was me, hypothetically, I would look at the credit cards and the debts that will be suing you. You can go to your court system and see what creditors are regularly suing in court, and then make those decisions. Hey, let me get the ones out that are more aggressive, are more eager to use the legal, the legal remedies to get them paid. And you got to look at those debt buyers. Again, all of these creditors and debt buyers do score your accounts, and depending on what you have or don't have, where you live, how much money you make, that's going to be an indicator or a factor of whether they're going to sue you or not. It's very complex and not easy.
So the way you decide this in answering Karen's question is, if you've decided, hey, I'm going to file at some point, you know that filing is going to stop any lawsuits. It's going to put you in this process that continues forward over the next 6 to 9 months. The way you decide this is basically based on how much of a risk is there that you're going to be sued in the meantime, and what's going to happen if that is the case. And Karen, what we often see people do at Upsolve is if they decide they're going to file bankruptcy, they'll often stop repaying their debts if those are dischargeable. So things like personal loans, credit cards, not things that could potentially get repossessed like a house or foreclosed on like a mortgage. But they'll stop paying those what are called consumer debts, because sometimes what happens is once you file, if you made, say, a big payment to a really aggressive collector or something like that, it can complicate the proceedings a little bit, where the trustee has to do what's called like a clawback to get back some of that money and pay other creditors. So most people do stop making those payments if there isn't a risk between the time that they stop and the time that they would get that bankruptcy processed of being sued and having significant consequences from that. And to Yale's point, don't want to give you legal advice on this. That is just what we see most people end up doing when they're about to enter a bankruptcy proceeding. Yale, any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, my only other thought would be, boy, if you live in a small town or city that doesn't have good public transportation, I would strongly suggest you make your car payments on time, because they do frequently repossess vehicles
quickly,
sell them at auction, and then you end up not only not having a vehicle, but on top of that, sometimes a deficiency balance that has to be paid.
Yeah. What I did when I filed is I stopped paying on my credit cards, but I kept paying on my car loan. And one of the main reasons for that is I wanted to reaffirm it, because I needed it as an Uber driver. So I
Right.
needed my car loan to survive the bankruptcy, which meant that I needed to be current on it. But the credit cards, I couldn't do both. Like I couldn't pay both the credit cards.
And again, most people need to drive to work if they live in a small
exactly.
town or a medium-sized town without
Yep.
public transportation. How else are you going to get to work if you don't have a vehicle?
Yep.
And once you file bankruptcy, it becomes very difficult to get credit at a reasonable price.
Yeah, totally agree. Well, Karen, thanks for your question. The rest of the audience, if you have any other questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. In the meantime, Yale, let's get back to you because I find you really interesting. What did you study in school on your way to becoming a lawyer? I'm always curious how people end up in that profession.
I came from a long line of CPAs. My grandfather was an accountant.
Okay.
My dad was an accountant. I said, what the hell, I'll be an accountant too. So I like numbers, and I was in the business school. So that's what I did.
Okay. So you studied accounting on the way up?
Accounting. So I'm pretty good with numbers.
Okay. I love that. What changed for you that you decided you wanted to go into the law as opposed to accounting?
I just didn't feel like I was ready to go to work yet. And I said, as I said in my story, all my friends will go to law school. So I'm like, I'm going to go to law school too. It was just like a random thing. I never, ever in my life wanted to be a lawyer. I never thought I would be a litigator. Like, what would I be doing in court? That's no way. That's not for me. Yeah. And everything I said no to, I ended up doing. So
it's so funny. I feel like that's often the case. Like if you go to law school and you're like, I'm going to go change the world, most of those people end up disappointed. But if you like kind of find your way into it and you don't really know what you're doing, you can often find things that are interesting.
And to answer some of these questions about rent, yes, you can include your back rent in your bankruptcy. Once your bankruptcy is filed, all of those unsecured debts get wiped out in exchange for you giving up your assets, if any. Yeah. So for those two people, maybe.
Yeah, I was responding back to Mamie. Yeah. Yep, back rent. Okay, so there's an interesting question here. So court costs also and other fees.
Oh yeah, for sure. All that's unsecured. So bankruptcy, again, if you do a Chapter 7, is a complete liquidation of all your debts in exchange for all your assets, if you have any. Chapter 13 is the wage owner plan, which is more like a garnishment where the court kind of takes your disposable income and then doles it out to all of your creditors.
Okay.
Prorata.
Great. Thanks for the question, Mamie. So one of the things that had the biggest influence on my career, Yale, was hitting rock bottom, like realizing it didn't matter how hard I worked. Once you got enough debt, you can't really pull yourself forward. And that was sort of like the opposite of the American dream that I'd been promised, that just says you work hard enough and you'll get ahead. Yeah. Sometimes there's barriers in the way. And so that completely shifted how I thought about my life and really moved me towards Upsolve, bankruptcy, and debt relief. What's something transformative that happened to you in your career that kind of changed how you see the world and your work?
Well, I was very fortunate. I had parents my grandparents, their parents, survived the Depression. So you're like my grandmother, like reused tinfoil, like who uses tinfoil, right?
Yeah.
But they were frugal, hardworking people, and they really embedded that in my life and in my upbringing. So I was very lucky to have parents that worked and saved, and my dad drove a Chevette, not a Corvette, back in the 80s. And I mean, he just didn't care. I mean, for him, were not important. And I think that's what a lot of society in this day and age now miss, is frugality provides you a lot of comfort and safety. And having material items like clothing and trips and going out to eat every meal is very expensive way to live. And I really thank my parents a lot about how they brought me up and how they taught me and my brother how to live comfortably without going overboard.
Yeah, you kind of saw through the matrix. Like the whole U.S. economy exists to get you to spend money, and if you don't have people like telling you don't have to do this to be happy, it's really hard to get to that.
And you're right, because on TV, on the radio, in the newspaper, well, newspapers don't exist anymore. But everybody says, "Boy, I bought something. I'm happy now."
Yeah,
that's really not true. Like having a whole closet full of designer clothes might make you think you're happy, but maybe sometimes financial security
Yeah.
A little bit more comfortable than having a nice pair of shoes.
Well, and maybe, I mean, there's nothing wrong with any of those things. It's just you got to be able to ask yourself, what am I trading for this? Right. And like a lot of times we don't think about that. And sometimes we're trading really, really exhausting and crushing debt for something that we think we want. And so it's great to have that example that you said from your parents that says, well, maybe you don't have to have this. Maybe
Right.
figure out what you want and save and like kind of work towards those things so that you can enjoy your money instead of feeling trapped by it.
I really feel bad for these people that do the buy now, pay later, because those
Yeah,
things,
those are hard.
those are really hard because one of them is easy, but then you have 5 or 6 coming out.
Mm,
I mean, it really kind of pyramids pretty quickly.
yeah.
And again, all these stores now do it online. It's all over the place. You can do it with plane tickets. You can do it at Amazon. You can do it everywhere now. So it's just really, I believe, out of control, unfortunately.
Yeah. It's hard to say no when you're already struggling. And then it's sort of just they get you and you go deeper. What do you think about, like, as somebody who thinks a lot about money, who, you know, you said a second ago, you grew up knowing it's important to save, it's important to not outspend your means. I'm curious, what is your personal philosophy of money? Like, what do you think money is for?
For me, money is for safety,
Hmm.
right? So
Hmm.
do I really need stuff or do I want comfort and safety that
Hmm.
I have it if I need it?
To know that if something bad happens, you can deal with that. Yeah.
So that the rainy day, saving some money back for those twists and turns in the road that throw people off track.
Hmm.
And again, I did debt collection for 20 years, and I'll tell you, most people are doing fine until some kind of roadblock or
Yeah.
turn comes in that gets them off track.
Yep.
Death, divorce, illness, loss of a job, and they can't ever recover. And then it's a slow cycle down. Like
Hmm.
they have a house of cards that
Hmm.
works as long as they stay healthy and they stay married and they keep their job.
Hmm.
But one of those things happen to you
Yep.
and you just can't get back up. The house of
Yep.
cards starts falling down around you
Yep.
because of something unexpected.
Yep.
If you don't have that safety net of friends, family, relatives, your own savings to help you through those difficult times, it's really hard.
Yep.
And having bad credit makes all your credit more expensive.
Hmm.
Buying a house is more expensive. Buying a car is more expensive. Having credit cards is expensive. So again, it is careful, thoughtful planning between you and your partner because most
Hmm.
people are married or have somebody significant in their life. And it makes a lot of sense to have 2 people paying the bills instead of 1.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. Yeah, I am. Just to throw this out there, I know when I was in my 20s, I never thought anything could happen to me. And then at 34, I got diagnosed with spine cancer, of all things, right? Like kind of out of the blue. And that's what happens for most people. Like you're thinking, oh, I'm going to be okay. Like I'm working, I'm healthy, or my relationship is good, my finances are okay. I'm redlining it here. Like if I have a bad month, things are going to get tough, but I'm okay. And then something like that comes along, and you're like, oh, whoa, I don't have any means of protecting myself
You get
here.
in a random car accident or a
Yeah,
fender
car accident.
bender, and you got a $3,000 deductible. Like,
Yeah,
where's that money
divorce.
come from?
Nobody wants it for you, but an ended relationship can be expensive.
Yeah,
And
very
it's not to
expensive.
say like you shouldn't feel shame for not having an emergency fund because it can be really hard to build that when you're struggling with debt. But you got to get out of that debt as quickly as possible so that you can build that emergency fund so that you can do what I was able to do, which is weather that and survive that storm and get back to being okay. And that should be really like the first thing that you do, I think, when you first get out of debt and can start saving, because it just gives you so much peace of mind, like Yale said.
Again, everything is hard. Losing weight is hard. Being
Mhm.
financially secure is hard. Going through college or education is hard.
Mhm.
But guess what? All that hard work pays dividends down the road. And I just don't think the schools and parents teach kids enough
Yep.
about postponement of enjoyment and waiting until you have enough money to buy something.
It's definitely important. And I think the other thing that's important, I'm curious if you would agree with this, is it's not just doing the hard work, but doing the right work. Because when I was trying to get myself out of debt, I was working, I don't know, 70, 80 hours a week to pay this off. And the debt kept getting bigger no matter what. And so it didn't matter how hard I worked. I needed to do the harder work of filing bankruptcy first. And then that hard work started adding up.
And I'm assuming when you filed bankruptcy, it was a pretty humbling experience.
Oh, yeah. It was the whole thing.
The table. I've been to many 341 hearings, and it is a very difficult process to see a third party go through your finances and talk about how you spent your money and what assets you have.
Yep, 100%. Let's see. This is exceed their energies in fighting over questions. Oh, yeah, this is really interesting. A random comment here. Not a question per se. But it is really interesting to think about how much fear and shame and division and a fear of people finding out keep us from making the hard decisions that we need to make in our lives.
Yeah, it's too bad.
Yeah, what is, just as we have a couple more minutes here, and I didn't see another question in here. Obviously not financial advice, but what do you think is the fastest path to building real financial security today?
Stop buying things you don't need. Number one.
Yeah.
You don't need 8 streaming services. You can deal with 1 or 2.
I feel personally attacked.
You don't need an expensive car. Buy, like my dad had, a Chevette. I mean, as long as it's reliable and can get you from A to B, that is great.
Yep.
Don't buy designer clothing. Don't go on fancy vacation. Live within your means. Most importantly, don't go out to dinner.
That can be a big one. Yeah.
I could probably, when I go out to dinner, I could probably buy groceries enough for my whole week.
Yeah. Going out is expensive. Or if you do, or I'm curious if you agree with this, go out to dinner, but go out to dinner when you've budgeted for it and you know you can afford it.
Right.
Because there's nothing wrong with going out as long as it's not keeping you from your other goals.
As long as it's in your budget. And again, what we need people to learn is how to budget. Yep. How to be financially educated to say, here's my income, here's my expenses. What can I afford and what can I do without to make my budget be positive and not negative? People with lack of financial education seem to buy things based on payment size, not on the actual cost of that credit.
Yeah, no, it's very true. And that can be very destructive. And I think it plays into Breakthrough's point here that I love. Breakthrough, I'm going to end on this and I'm going to ask Yale for his closing remarks. But the financial system isn't really as complicated as it's made to seem. To Yale's point, you save more money, you save money, you don't spend more than you earn, you invest that money, you can get financially secure and even wealthy. But it's hidden from us. The whole system designs to teach us, spend more money and you'll be happy. Or, don't worry about like the job that you're doing or bettering your future. Just put your head down, do what you need to do and you'll be fine. And oftentimes that isn't true. Oftentimes what you need to do is educate yourself, learn a bit about how the financial system works. And most importantly, learn how your debt works. Like learn how the interest accrues on that, how it grows over time. And the opposite, learn how your money can grow over time if you stop paying the credit card companies and start paying yourself that interest through investments over time. This system can work for you. Yale's proof of what it can do when you work hard and you do the right things financially. I have a house and a car and a family that I never thought I could have when I was struggling with debt because I learned these lessons, was able to get through using legal methods to move forward. And the same can be true for you. Even when the system is stacked against you, as it very much is in many instances, you can absolutely pull yourself forward if you do the right things. So Yale, what do you think somebody who's on this call, who's saying exactly what we saw there? The system is stacked against me. I can't pull myself forward. What's the one piece of advice you would want to leave them with?
Boy, I was thinking about that as you were talking. I started thinking, do without as much as you can. But I think a wiser statement would be create a budget that is cash flow positive. Stick with it.
And how do you do it?
I know it's hard.
The word budget is scary for some people. Like, what's the easiest way to have a budget?
Get a piece of paper, write down your income, write down what you spend every month, go through your checkbook, go through your credit card bill, and figure out what you spend. And if you write it all down for 3 months, you will say, oh my gosh, why am I spending all this money on Chick-fil-A when I could be eating and cooking at my house and saving $250 a month?
Yep.
So again, you don't realize what you spend until you write it down and realize in black and white, holy smokes, I spend this much. And then that will start you down the road of financial success.
And what we see a lot at Upsolve is that when people do that, which it's something that our tool helps them do, kind of get a sense of expenses and income and all these things. When people do that and they see, oh, wow, I am actually doing the best that I can. Like, I have actually cut my expenses down and I still can't deal with this debt. That's when you know for sure and can have confidence that, okay, I need to do something to get myself out of this debt.
Right. And there's two things, right? File bankruptcy, get a side gig, try to find a roommate or somebody else that can help you pay your bills. I mean, there are all options out there.
But you don't know until you do the scary thing, make that budget, look at the math. Because it's so hard to see those things and think clearly when you're struggling under the weight of all of that.
And again, it's so much better when you have a partner in crime with you, a spouse, a significant other, somebody that helps pay your bills.
Yep.
I mean, that really, in the United States, the joint living is a huge game changer.
Yeah, well, and if you don't have a partner, because a lot of people aren't fortunate, the good news is there are people out there like Upsolve, like Solo and Yale, who can help you walk through this process. We're here. We're really excited to help you get back on your feet financially and start making those decisions that put money in your pocket. Yale, thanks so much for being here tonight, man. Always a pleasure to talk to you. Of course.
Again.
And for those who joined us, if you found this helpful, if you think somebody else would find it helpful, send it their way. Join us again next Monday. We do this every Monday night, answering questions about debt and how to get back on your feet financially. And if you found this helpful, share this with somebody else. Remember the important thing to Yale's story. There's 30,000+ people that George and Solo had helped prior to Yale's joining.
300,000.
So sorry, 300,000. Excuse me. Upsolve has helped over 17,000 people file bankruptcy, and we're helping more every day. You're not alone in this thing. Like, it can feel so shameful to struggle with debt, but everybody does to some extent, and finances are hard. And we're here to help make that a little bit easier and give you some community. So take care, everybody. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you again soon.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, everybody.